Hi, I'm Nigel O'Neill and welcome to BTA Bytes. In each episode of BTA Bytes, we sit down with an industry expert to explain a particular topic or technology, which we do by asking them three simple questions. What is it? Why is it important? And what are the key takeaways you, the audience, should know? Today, we're going to be talking about the topic of interactive documents, and I'm joined by Daniel Hembling, who is the UK Managing Director of Guut. Guut is headquartered in New Jersey in the US, but have operations around the world, and they specialise in the provision of interactive documents. So Daniel, welcome to the show. Please briefly introduce yourself and tell us what first got you interested in the topic of interactive documents.
Nigel, thank you very much for having me. So, as already introduced, I'm Daniel Hembling. I work with businesses with a focus on how they use information from day to day. And most of my work focuses on helping teams rethink the way that they create, the way that they manage and deliver information, especially in areas like data presentation, distribution, or their operations and their client communications. Because while we've made huge progress in the way that information is created, we've paid far less attention to the way that how information is actually delivered and then used. Or, you know, in our age, we say consumed, but used is the best word, actually. So It's that gap that where my interest in interactive documents comes from.
I was going to say that's quite an interest you have there. So let's dive into the first question, which was, of course, the big one. What are interactive documents?
I get that question a lot, but so I'll start by saying
to explain this then.
Well, I certainly hope so. It's supposed to be part of what I do. I'll actually start by saying what they're not. Interactive documents are not really documents. They're software in the guise of documents, but are portable the same way that documents are. We like to say that we solve the data portability problem, which is something that maybe we can discuss further on, but that's pretty much it. So a traditional document is a static one-way information exchange.
Okay.
Once it's produced, it's, well, pretty much immediately outdated because it's a frozen piece of time. It's basically like it's the same format as a paper book. So since 1440, which is when Johannes Gutenberg created the printing press, nothing's changed in the way that we use information. You know, we've created computers, we've created all sorts of these flashy gadgets and technologies and ways of receiving, sending, processing everything else for information. But you and I, what we do is the way we receive information, you see this thing and you basically read the letters and the numbers and you're like, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you've, this is just briefly about interactive documents. If you've ever used a PDF creation service online, and I think you and I are basically thinking of the same service, but we're not going to mention it.
Okay.
They produce what's called a flattened PDF to make it smaller.
Yes.
What happens is when you build up a PDF, it's layered, and when you flatten it, basically it collapses everything, all of the code together, all of the zeros and ones. And essentially, you get a file which visually is great. You and I can read it, but AI, for example, cannot read it because it's kind of like showing a painting that has text to someone who's never learned to read. And when you ask them what they're looking at, they'll go, "Well, you know, it's a very nice picture and it's got some squiggles." So actually, machines can't distinguish between which aspect is picture and which aspect is text. On the other hand, an interactive document is dynamic, it's responsive, and it behaves more like software than just graphic content.
Okay. And so it behaves more like software. So from a user perspective, take me through sort of a user journey as a typical example of how, say I get my credit card bill. How's that different?
I love this example because we work with a couple of banks on their SME credit card statements. And credit card statements is We all experience that pain. Come the end of the billing cycle, we receive a message on our app. You know, most banking apps look really beautiful, and you open them up and you see the numbers, and either you're very shocked or very happy, depending on who you are. But
I'm generally shocked. But anyway, that's a different story. I mean, but
I feel your pain. I know what
yes,
you mean. But the idea here is that when you receive the notification of the statement, you will receive. You'll go onto the app or onto the banking website, depending on how you do it. Essentially, they'll just give you a PDF, which is exactly the pain I was talking about earlier. Because then, if you are like a retail user, like you and I personally,
yes,
we've got anywhere between, some people have like 10 transactions because they don't like using their credit cards, but there are others that have like 100 or a couple of hundred transactions over a month, and SMEs tend to have even more.
yes.
So what happens is it's very difficult for the accounting department to be able to distinguish. I mean, if there's a company that has 50 employees, there are, let's say, a total of 30 or 40 credit cards issued. So then they have to go through every single credit card. They have to do reconciliation. And then, which is this trader? Because if you look at your credit card statement, you'll usually get the trader, what we call the trader abbreviation. And the trader
Okay.
abbreviation is something like PRET AM 5321. And you're like, okay, that's great. I can maybe distinguish the fact that that's a Pret-a-Manger. That's not a shameless plug here. A lot of people go there.
They have a lovely
Even
chicken
on business
avocado.
as well. Yeah, exactly. Or just a cappuccino. But essentially, it's really difficult to be able to pass through all of that data and to know which can be assigned to which category. And an interactive statement makes it so easy, because instead of a PDF, you can receive as a user an HTML file. You open it up on any browser. It's downloadable, so you can work with it even offline if you need to, like if you're on a flight. And ultimately, the AI in the background will be able to distribute the expenses into different categories. And the categories can be retailers. The categories could be times of day. The categories could be dates. It could, literally, you can split it up any way you like, or any way that the bank would like to categorize for you, which is something which they can align with the business users pretty simply, and they can make their own changes. One hidden thing in there for banks is that actually it provides them also a bit of branding opportunity, because when it's an HTML file, you can make different tabs and you can make it interesting. And actually you can constantly plug like news or promotions or anything else, because statements, let's be fair, they aren't really branding opportunities for companies, for banks. People, roll their eyes and don't even download the statement usually.
Okay, so what I'm hearing, so what an interactive document is it a replacement, or this is more of a question, sorry, rather than what I'm hearing. Is it a replacement for, say, the productivity suites from the big houses we know, like Microsoft and Google, for example, and Apple?
Yeah, that's a big question, Nigel, and it's quite a loaded question. I love it. We would like to think that we are the painkiller for all of these. That is potentially a plan in the future, is having an alternative opportunity. At the moment, Europe is talking about data sovereignty and issues like this, and
Yes.
actually it is a way to tackle it, because ultimately we have there's a format of interactive document that it can change based on the inputs. It can be read and interfaced by humans and AI, which is of course the way of processing data in the future. It can provide varying outputs depending on what the user wants to see on their screen or what they want to interact with, and it can evolve over time. So technically, an information application is a way of presenting data. It can replace like slide decks. It can replace Excel spreadsheet. Well, yeah, I mean, what you can do with what we call them info apps is you can automate a database, like a data dump, or you can just extract a CSV file from the data, automate it, and have this document which auto updates all the time,
Okay.
if you need to. So
Okay.
it's definitely a format. Again, maybe it won't like completely delete all of the office suites out there, but it is a new way of presenting information that is appealing to people.
Okay, so it's a new way for basically for us to consume information in a more interactive fashion. Okay,
Exactly,
so I
yes.
mean, you've kind of alluded to it already, but I suppose moving on to the next question, which is why are interactive documents important?
I love this question actually, and I've got a few answers to this one. But essentially, documents are kind of the bottleneck at the moment of the AI era.
Okay,
Because most organizations still, I like talking about organizations. I mean, we can talk about the end consumer as well, because
yep,
interactive documents are okay. I'm going to call them info apps for brevity here.
okay,
But
cool, yep,
info apps are really appealing to end like retail consumers or end users like you and I as well. But I work with organizations. But most organizations still run on a plethora of documents while they're now operating in a software world. So
okay,
PDF was first presented in 1993 or 94. I think it's 1993. So essentially, at the moment, we're running businesses in 2026 based on a file format which was, established in 1993,
yep,
which is based on a way of perceiving information which is 600 years old. So we'd like to change this. So in terms of the bottleneck, AI can now generate content, but again, it gets trapped into PDFs, it gets trapped into slides, emails, all static formats. And honestly, it's kind of boring, considering what kind of exciting things happening everywhere else, and the times we're living in. That's the first main point. The second one is that the cost of static information is exploding. I'll go a bit more into detail with this one, but we've got
okay,
outdated documents. We have a manual network, and you have version chaos.
yes,
Um, the first time, for example, when I saw, Google Docs, and you have the version options, and I was like, that is actually a super cool idea, because when people are working with this thing consistently over time, and you've got groups working from remotely and from a distance, working in global teams, it really is a valuable idea.
yep,
But it becomes a bit chaotic at one point. You're like, okay, we've all been on a call where somebody's like, I don't see this information in the document. And somebody else goes, oh, well, that's because it's document, 2.1. It's like, oh, okay, I'm working off 1.6. And I've prepared this report off document 1.6, and there's a 2.1, and nobody's, um, so
I
this,
get that. Previously I've in my career where you'd be working in a document, and also the key thing is it would then corrupt because so many people were working on it, and thankfully that has been solved. But I remember days when you would be like, we've just lost half a day's worth of work because the document either wasn't saved or someone corrupted it, or they introduced a new graph or whatever it may be, or visual into the document, and all of a sudden it just decided the document went, I've had enough. So yes, I hear the pain and I've felt it.
that's where the automation comes in.
Yeah,
Ultimately, one really raw example is kind of a hidden example for a lot of people. I had a couple of conversations recently with CFOs of the challenger banks, and we've got a couple of examples here. So the first one
yeah,
is, imagine you are a bank with 1 million clients, and you've just switched to the cloud. And it's excellent. The way that it works is IT managers go to the CEO and they say, cool, let's do the cool thing. And this is now for brick and mortar banks as well happening. The
yeah,
IT department go to the CEO and they say, look, we really want to switch to the cloud because it's the new thing. It's the next step in tech and everything else. And the CEO, because they have to promote themselves to the stakeholders, to the shareholders, to the board, that they are an innovative person. Even sometimes it really is just an ego thing, and they go, well,
yeah,
what's it going to cost? And the IT department says, well, it's going to cost X, which is what the salespeople of the cloud companies, say that that migrating to the cloud will cost this much. And then what happens is they switch to the cloud. Now, just an example again, it doesn't need to be banks. It can be like we work with utility companies, which are exactly the same. So they switch to the cloud. And what happens is you produce 1 million, you have 1 million clients. So you produce 1 million statements every month, for example, a water bill.
Yes.
And you produce these in form of you guessed it, in form of a PDF. So ergo, every month you produce 1 million PDFs, you produce 1 million new PDFs, then actually you have to find a place to store these PDFs. Where? Well, we've got this flashy new cloud that we can use. Great. So you put all of them in there. So every single month you have to increase your cloud storage capacity by 1 million PDF files at least. So to produce the PDFs to start with, you need to access your data in the cloud. And while the data is technically yours, you need to pay the cloud providers for what's called data egress, right? You query the cloud. And with most of the cloud providers, I think it was something like 20 to 25 cents for every query after 4 queries for a period of time. So if you're paying 20 to 25 cents for every query and you're querying your database 1 million times to produce these statements,
Yes.
you've got that expense. So then you create your latest batch of PDFs, you send them out to your clients, then you store them. If you ever need information from those PDFs again, of course, you have to tap back into that resource and pay, egress fees again. So I'll charge you again. So to provide a standard service to clients, which is just giving them an invoice or giving them a statement of how much electricity they've consumed or how much money they've spent or how much money they've saved. I mean, we're all talking about spending, but some people tend to save money still.
Yes.
You have to pay enormous fees, which is a real pain in the neck for companies. I mean, the expletives I've heard from CFOs, because they're the only person from the whole company that will actually see the bill at the end of the month, and they'll go, "What?" And then the only person they can complain to is the CEO and the board. So you've got your data; it's yours, but you pay for it. And the silver lining is that you have to do it all over again next month. The silver lining is actually for the cloud providers, not for you.
And so how does interactive documents solve that?
Okay, that's a good question. So to contrast this, a company can send out an info app. It is in the format, so the recipient will receive an HTML file, which is downloadable. And it basically contains sort of the standard algorithm and the base data sets for, as we mentioned, pret-a-manger scenario of this is you'll just get a trader. Instead of a trader, you will, or rather the AI which we're using will actually use the retailers and then extends the names so they are readable by you and I. So for example, let's say we have an employee who spends a lot of time at Pret, but different ones. So we'll have a breakdown of category of how much they have spent on food and drink for the month, for business purposes, for example. And then there will be a smaller breakdown in which locations, and you'll get that immediately with a couple of clicks of the mouse, rather than having to pass through non-legible abbreviations of retailers, SMEs. If you've got 200 transactions, you're browsing through all of those, trying to find, simple things. So you can glean a lot more information from it. The idea with these files, the HTML files, is you distribute them once to your clients. And every time they need the automatically updated data, they will make a query to your cloud rather than you making a query to your cloud. So instead of you making 1 million queries to be able to get the information and just send it as a solid state thing, your end users, your clients, will have a file which essentially they will tap into that resource. And because they're only doing that query once for every period or a couple of times, the charge is switched from you to them. And they're not spending any money on that query anyway. So this is how organizations like Bank of Singapore, they've been able to reduce their cloud expenses from, it was something like $6 million down to $600,000 per month, just by saving from that.
So it's a significant cost saving for the enterprise. So the key, what you're saying here, this is not only about efficiency, but it's also cost effectiveness as well.
I don't like leading with the cost effectiveness thing, but it really is bonkers. The difference between spending that amount and not spending that amount, because suddenly the CFOs start going, wow, there's so many more things that we can utilize this expense for, rather than paying these costs, which were, I mean, they're very much not obvious for lots of organizations, and everybody does want to innovate, and cloud is actually a fantastic way of doing it. It's just being able to have some sort of power or control over how the data is used apart from being stored.
I get it. Having sat in the hot seat for the budget, for technology, on a number of times, and been in that role, I fully appreciate the efficiency gains that you're talking about there. So moving on to the next, which is the last and final question. What are the key takeaways that the audience should, after they listen to this, should take away from this and think, aha, this is what I need to know?
I mean, I could talk for ages more about this, but I mean, Daniel's 3 takeaways here.
Okay, let's fire.
The first one is stop thinking in documents and start thinking in information flows. So we need to ask ourselves as an organization, but even as end recipients and people who produce content as well. Every email that you send is content, every blog post, everything else that we do as individuals. So we need to ask ourselves, where does this information come from? Where is it going? Where does it go in the end of the day? And what should happen in between? This is, it's a valuable choice of how do I present the information maybe to be more appealing. Sure, you can write a blog and people are incredibly good at writing, but if they have to present any sort of stat or data, they're lost and they're like, okay, what am I going to do? I'll create an Excel file and just copy paste like a screenshot or something. And it's completely out of place with the beautiful writing that's gone on.
So the next takeaway?
The second takeaway would be identify your high friction documents. So we've got, of course, we mentioned statements, but it could be proposals. It could be onboarding packs for companies. It could be reports. It could be compliance docs. It could be, it can even be, like we said, blog posts, newsletters, team memos, anything like that. Basically, if any document has to be edited at some point, has to be resent again or forwarded to somebody else with a little bit of different information or manually updated, it's a prime candidate to be transformed into an info app. And the last
number 3?
Yes, number 3 is we should treat documents like products, because that's what they are now. So we've noticed that organizations that win tends to want their documents the way that they want their software. They want their documents crafted and they want them continuously improving rather than staying static. You add interactivity and you add brand building to that mix and you're a definite winner. So the sort of punchline here is documents haven't evolved, but everything around there has. So info apps turn information into action.
That sounds perfect. So thank you for that, Daniel. That's been quite insightful. I didn't realize when you quantified it with the Bank of Singapore example, that was brilliant because it really gave a very clear picture of what that transaction, also what that changes mean and how it's transforming in terms of the actual cost base as well, and then being able to utilize that savings to go and invest elsewhere. So thank you very much. That was brilliant. This BTA Byte was brought to you by the team from Behind the Algorithm. Please visit www.behindthealgo.com for more information, or please listen to the podcast from wherever you get your podcast from. Thank you very much, and bye for now.